Hey everybody, welcome back to Go Read Some Comics with me, Professor Jenna. Wicked was easily one of the biggest surprises in pop culture for me this year. In the span of 2 weeks, I went from being annoyed at its marketing to reluctantly admitting that I might watch it on streaming to seeing it twice in theaters in the span of 1 week. I have hope that between the initial box office numbers and the sing-along over Christmas and the inevitable Oscar push and the release of Part 2, it's eventually going to make $1 billion, and I cannot wait for that moment. Regardless of whenever that happens, I feel like Wicked's success is unbelievable, and there are elements from it that the ever-growing behemoth of superhero stories can really learn from. This one is obvious, but it still needs to be said. After Wicked and Barbie, you can't argue that women don't want to see themselves reflected in blockbuster stories. I lived in the trenches of the 2010s of everyone wondering if any female superhero adaptation could break the proverbial glass ceiling, and it turned Wonder Woman and Captain Marvel and the Supergirl TV show into these massive, monumental events. Each one of those projects had their own blessings and shortcomings, and I will argue until the end of time that Supergirl was the most quietly significant one, but it felt like they needed to shoulder the weight of all of feminism while still appealing to a predominantly male audience. The way that you use peanut butter to hide a dog's medicine. Even the newer wave of female-fronted projects, Birds of Prey, WandaVision, She-Hulk, Ms. Marvel, The Marvels, Echo, and Agatha All Along, have all been held to unrealistic expectations or immediately written off by male audiences as a waste of time for just existing as they are. I still think there's a long way to go in terms of female representation in superhero media, including being even more unafraid to embrace womanhood and girlhood in all of its messy glory. The current comics have started to show what this could look like, with Black Cat and Poison Ivy and Power Girl all becoming hits just because they're genuinely good, while also featuring flawed female protagonists. Wicked takes that a step further, filtering a story about personal empowerment and the rise of fascism and the flaws of white feminism through traditionally girly things like fashion and the color pink and sweeping fantasy. While the movie isn't trying to answer every question or provide a universally perfect view on its issues, it proves that if your story is good and impassioned and feels authentic in some way, audiences are going to see themselves in it regardless. In my opinion, one of the best and worst things to happen to superhero media was Superman director Richard Donner's commitment to verisimilitude. This idea of grounding the fantastical in a sense of reality worked for Superman 78, especially because it was coming out in the new Hollywood movement, which prioritized these grounded, salt-of-the-earth movies and not larger-than-life feats like Superman. But in the decades since, verisimilitude has become a crutch across superhero storytelling. Especially in the post-9/11 2000s, it felt like comics bent over backwards to show their heroes in a harsh and real reality that was as close to ours as possible. With some exceptions, the movies of that decade's superhero boom have followed suit, and the internet has argued about it incessantly ever since. Yes, some comics and movies and television shows have gotten weirder, but there's still a portion of the audience that immediately views anything that wouldn't work in our reality or isn't explained in something tangible as somehow jumping the shark. I think that's because a lot of the successes of the superhero boom have had one foot in and one foot out of our reality. For every talking tree or shrinking superhero or Atlantis or Wakanda, there's a fight in an airport tarmac or an over-explanation of lore. Comic writer Grant Morrison put it perfectly in an interview with Rolling Stone in 2011, saying, quote, "Kids understand that real crabs don't sing like the ones in The Little Mermaid, but you give an adult fiction and the adult starts asking really effing dumb questions like, quote, how does Superman fly? How do those I-beams work? Who pumps the Batmobile's tires? It's an effing made-up story, you idiot. Nobody pumps the tires." Yes, Wicked does function to answer some of these questions about The Wizard of Oz, but it still relishes in a suspension of disbelief. I'm not just talking about the musical numbers themselves, although it is ironic that essentially every musical number in a superhero adaptation has been met with a sense of disdain. After hearing the Ozian vocabulary, I don't want anyone to tell me that older comics are unreadable or that the dialogue of Jack Kirby is unadaptable. If audiences can already understand Infinity Stones and anchor beings and canon events and ultimate nullifiers, they can be on board with whatever you want to throw at them without having to view it through a lens of a real world. I mentioned this a bit when I spoke about Wicked in my last video, but it still bears repeating. Practical filmmaking is proving to be extremely refreshing. This movie, almost by virtue of being in the works for so long, utilizes its budget and its technical elements in ways that continue to astonish me. From the costumes to the sets to Cynthia Erivo belting while doing her own stunts and flying upside down on a broom, there is a clear sense of pride and creativity and of trying to get it right on the first try. Any other movie would have most likely digitally added in the millions of poppies for this one single shot in the opening sequence, but Wicked decided to actually grow them, and I feel like that's really a testament of what the movie was trying to do. Not only does this make the old Hollywood fan in me extremely happy, but it further proves to me that we don't need to accept an unnecessary amount of CGI in superhero and genre movies. Yes, there are some elements that are always going to have to be handled digitally, but hearing that VFX workers are woefully overworked and that entire set pieces are being digitally changed after the fact just gets frustrating as an audience member. It's also frustrating because honestly, it's easy to tell when a digital element in a project or an over-reliance on the volume just looks off. More so because we're having to be on alert amid the deluge of garbage garbage AI art. Big blockbuster media like this should be able to transport us and immerse us instead of immediately killing that immersion by looking like some sort of uncanny crap on your mom's Facebook feed. Sure, there are moments in Wicked where the CGI isn't flawless or the backlighting kind of washes things out, but it's so much easier for me to forgive those things when the other technical elements are so strong and are so tangible. I would rather rewatch Wicked's worst looking scenes 100 times over than subject myself to the best looking scenes of projects that are primarily shot on the volume. On that note, Wicked illustrates something that a lot of stories today have not been able to manufacture: genuine chemistry and charisma. I have spent all week wanting to scream from the rooftops about how good Cynthia Erivo, Ariana Grande, and Jonathan Bailey are in this movie. Erivo is transformative, and she immediately draws you in as Elphaba, to the point where defying gravity is honestly one of the most cathartic things I've seen on screen in a while. Having grown up in a Nickelodeon household, I initially had trouble visualizing how Grande's Galinda would work, but she thoroughly surprised me, and she brought an energy that I haven't seen outside of screwball actresses in the 1940s. And everything Bailey does in this movie had me giggling and kicking my feet. I wholeheartedly agree with the tweets comparing him to Gene Kelly or Cary Grant, or Cary Grant's various alleged boyfriends. Once any combination of the three of them share a scene together, it is mesmerizing in a way that I forgot we were kind of capable of in a modern blockbuster context. The fact that the flirting and innuendo are so electrifying when the movie is still rated PG is a Herculean feat to me, and it makes me very emotionally worried for part 2. It also serves as proof to me that superhero stories have no excuse not to do the same. Mainstream superhero comics have gotten better here and there at having fun with the romances and the tete-a-tete between their characters, but by and large, the adaptations have kind of fallen short. We have the gratuitous shirtless scene in a Marvel movie or the rare sex scene in a more adult-oriented project, but the majority of the genre and of modern film is still desexualized. R.S. Benedict's 2021 essay, "Everyone is Beautiful and No One is Horny," articulates this better than I could, saying in part, "No one is attracted to anyone else, no one is hungry for anyone else. We're told that Tony Stark and Pepper Potts are an item, but no actual romantic or sexual chemistry between them is shown in the films. Wonder Woman and Steve Trevor utterly lack the sexual chemistry to convince us that either of them would be thirsty enough to commandeer a coma victim's body, as they do in Wonder Woman 1984, so that they can enjoy a posthumous hookup." Every time this debate comes up with superhero movies, people interpret it as a very black and white situation, with the pendulum either swinging towards the current brand of sexlessness or towards something X-rated. I think that is a massive oversight that sells almost all of pop culture history short. Before and in the beginning of the Hays Code in 1934, movies found increasingly clever ways to hint at innuendo without actually showing anything scandalous. Comics did the same following the establishing of the Comics Code Authority in 1954. Again, I think the post-9/11 world of the 2000s made us afraid to show fun and flirting and courtship in some sort of actiony context, and we're all worse off because of it. Like I said, current comics have gradually made it better, but the chemistry in Wicked shows how much further we still need to go across the board. Genuine chemistry and charisma between your leads will only make people more endeared to their characters and to whatever massive arc they're about to go on. As far as superhero projects go, we are already seeing this a bit with any interview involving Pedro Pascal and Vanessa Kirby for Fantastic Four First Steps, but I really hope that they don't become the anomaly. I do have a feeling that studios are going to very literally learn from Wicked's success, and we will probably see a deluge of musical adaptations in the coming years. While I don't necessarily expect that on the superhero side, I would love to see Wicked help lift up some of the more fantastical elements of the Marvel and DC universes. Amethyst and Zatanna and Otherworld and Strange Academy could all resonate with the Wicked audience if done right in comics or in another adaptation. I mourn the versions of Black Knight and the Eternals we could have gotten that would have leaned more into those elements too. The potential is still there, and I hope it isn't squandered in the future. If you saw Wicked, what did you think of it? Is there anything from it that you think could help influence movies and comics and TV shows going forward? Share your thoughts in the comments below. As always, you can find me on social media at Hey It's Jenna Lynn. Please don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already done so. And as always, go read some comics.